You're busy, you've got a decent practice, but nobody wants to be decent. You want to be great, and you want to have a great practice. So how did the most productive, profitable dentist in the nation balance real life, work, and profits, and somehow make it all seem fun? Well, it comes down to simple, everyday practices. So grab a lunch, join us as we chat with top clinicians and influencers to discover their formula for uncommon success. Are you ready? Then it's time to explore everyday practices with Vicki McManus-Peterson and Dr. Chad Johnson.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Practices. Today, this is Chad Johnson, and I'm here with my special co-host, Regan Robertson. How you doing, Regan?
I'm doing excellent. Hello, everybody.
All right. And Vicki is off still in Africa, so you'll have to excuse her while she's, having lots of fun and helping serve people and filling her heart with joy, which is wonderful for her. Regan is the CMO at Productive Dentist Academy. And today we have a special guest. Why don't you introduce our special guest, Regan, because you know him plenty.
Oh, yes, I've got the honor of knowing him for almost a decade now. Christopher Moriarty, he's been our VP of Business Development for the last, over 8 years at this point, and he is an avid CE junkie, just like some of our top producing dentists. He keeps things fun. He keeps things new. I could go on about him for probably 20 or 30 minutes, one of my very best friends, and he brings a lot.
Including author of insert catchy title here.
Catchy title here.
Yep.
Yes,
and in addition to that too, he could probably write 3 or 4 more books, I think, with what you've got cooking up.
Well, with all the things that we hear, there's just no shortage of people looking for just guidance. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today is what are people out there saying? What questions are they asking? Where are they kind of investing too much energy to solve a problem that, people have solved before them? And it's you got some people who are just crushing it, but you got a lot of others who they're having a rough time.
Well, as you know, we've had you on the podcast before, so we wanted to get more content with you and more touch time with you. The people are craving you.
Or the ones with low standards. Yes.
So in the last couple of weeks, you've been all over the place. You've been speaking to, I saw on Facebook that you had that one crowd of 750. There's been plenty of others. You've been speaking to thousands of dentists. Where you been, first off?
Yeah, so it's been, as this CE cycle goes, it's heavy in the spring, falls off in the summer, then comes back in the fall. So we are midstream in about 9 weeks straight, visiting different cities. And the reason that we kind of go to lengths to get in these places is, Chad, how difficult is it to package up that team and jump on an airplane and bring them anywhere? Right. Financially aside, just the coordination of all those lives gets difficult. So when we have the opportunity to kind of literally meet people where they are, we want to take advantage. So with our strategic partnership with Midway Dental Distributors, they've been hosting all-day seminars all around the country. So I've been in Indianapolis, Madison, Vegas, and the list kind of goes on. But the reason that I like it is it proves one of our core tenets at PDA, that really all the, I'm going to call them excuses, but most people, don't feel like excuses. They feel like reasons as to why they're struggling. Has to do a lot with their geography, has to do with the people in their area, has to do with their insurance programs and whatever it is. And by teaching essentially the same philosophies from city to city to city, you see that at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all working with people. We're all communicating with our patients in the same way. So we can share different tactics to make things just a little bit smoother.
That's perfect. When I think of you, Chris, in relation to PDA and dentistry as a whole, I'm a gaming nerd, just so all the listeners can learn a little bit about me. And there's a game that I used to play obsessively called Age of Empires. And in Age of Empires, do you guys remember that?
Yes.
It points to you. So remember the little scout that would go out? You'd have this beautiful, huge map, but it was all black. And you would have to go out and light the way with your scout. And then the villagers back at home would be working, and they would be building the empire in the back there. So Chris, I really think of you as our scout. And you are always on the front lines. You're always looking at the trends. You're the eyes and the ears as you go out all over the United States. So digitally and physically. So over the past just couple of weeks, listeners, I really want to just kind of brag on Chris and what he's done. He's been to Las Vegas, Houston, Dallas, Indianapolis, Madison. everywhere.
Throw
And
Atlanta in
so
there.
many airports. What are some of the things that you've been seeing from the doctors that you've been able to interact with? What are they talking about? What's hot?
So what's been interesting is that, a lot of what I do these days is just me. So I'll go out and I'll do an all-day course, which is excellent because you can get really in depth. But some of these events have been your traditional seminar where there's many people giving different lectures. And everyone who's there is obviously well qualified, they're excellent. But where you hear the frustration across all different levels of, whether it's a scratch start, acquisition, mid-career, whatever, it just seems like we've trapped ourselves in an echo chamber in the whole industry, where everyone's just sort of bouncing around different versions of the same idea, and everything's just getting washed out. It's getting vaguer and vaguer and vaguer. So people are having a hard time like walking away from some of this quote unquote education, really knowing what to do. I always kind of joke that you can sum most of it up when just, don't go backwards, go forwards, don't go down, go up, and create value, and then it'll all be okay. And folks,
Work smarter, not harder.
Oh, thanks. Oh, goodness. Thanks for the tip. Appreciate that. So it's just been, I see that on their faces. So one of the things that I've always tried to do is give them very granular recommendations. Say this, do that. At PDA, we're so, our sort of in the center of our core is our scheduling philosophies. We walk through different examples because we need them to know that it has to feel different first. And that scheduling methodology is going to change the tempo and regulate exactly how that day feels. So when I'm talking to people, let's kind of go through just the different stages. So meeting a lot of folks who either doing scratch starts or doing acquisitions. And the scratch start folks, they don't know what they don't know. Meaning they're gonna build this building. Many have come before them. Usually they're working with a group now, so they've kind of got a blueprint. But I'm telling you that the folks who are acquiring practices, I'm not going to call it shady dealings because that makes it seem like, well, and maybe it is shady dealings. I don't know. But consistently over the last, not even just the last few weeks, the last few years, that there have been a lot of fuzzy numbers in terms of how many active patients they're truly acquiring, what the percentage is within the various insurances that they take, or even whether it's like Massachusetts, some of the state programs, or Medicaid, or whatever it might be, and they're getting in there and finding out that what they bought, the number was so inflated, and they don't know how to correct for that. This is a brand new team; they've never owned anything before, and now all of a sudden it's no different than buying a house. Then all of a sudden the market plunges, or you find out that the basement floods every 2 weeks, or whatever it is. So a lot of these people are just starting right out of the gates, day one, feeling burned, by the industry itself. So Chad, you bought your practice, right?
No, I started from scratch.
So you were a scratch start.
Yes.
So when you came out, I mean, where were your anxieties? Was it mostly around where am I going to find patients, or was it just kind of you hang your shingle and people come?
I was hometown boy, and so a lot of patients came in that were friends and family, so that was good. My concern was reimbursement rates for every insurance that I took under the sun, and how I was going to make maybe next month, but maybe this month's bank bill and stuff like that. So it was just, pay per month problems.
Yeah, so cash flow is always one of their core issues.
Oh, I could have said that in 2 words, cash flow. Sorry.
Yeah, but that's actually, it's perfect in that a lot of these folks, they haven't run so much as a lemonade stand before this. And now all of a sudden they're trying to figure out how to manage a team, plus do the dentistry, plus forge relationships, plus marketing. And I tell them all, like, if it feels like it's more complex than it's ever been, they're not paranoid. Like it literally is. There's so many different variations and variables, and it's so easy to fall into different traps where you kind of got two camps. You got the ones who they know they're going to be in for it, and they know that it's going to be a grind in the first couple of years. But more and more, and I don't know if it's a byproduct of the new Facebook generation where people are always chatting and they're hearing stories that may or may not be even remotely accurate, but either they all want to come out and hit $1 million their first year in collections, or what's a race to get 10 offices under their belt. And you hear these things and they mean well, but it's what we've seen in so many dentists over time is, you kind of be careful what you wish for. It's also, I always ask them all the time when it comes to expansion, I go, do you want to make more money? Do you want to manage more people? Because the people are usually where the stress comes from. So when they're thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to hire these 6 people right out of the gates. It's like, based on what? It's certainly not based on numbers, certainly not based on capacity, flow, demand, or supply. It's just build it and they will come. And all of a sudden they're just dragging this financial anchor around all the time. So Chad, when you built out, what was your path? So first it was you, obviously somebody's got to answer the phone.
Yeah.
And when did you do your own hygiene out of the gates?
I did. And for the first 6 months, and my hygienist was coming out of school at the end of the year. So it was a mid-semester kind of thing that she was going to be jumping on board in January. So when I started, it was July 5th, 2005. And I went for 6 months doing my own hygiene. I had one employee that was answering the phone and an assistant. So she was a cross-trained assistant, was my first employee.
So when you started to really hit your stride, when did you know to bring on the next person? When did you know to increase those hours? Was it literally just by feel, or?
I did it backwards than a lot of people do. A lot of people wait to be busting at the seams or bursting at the seams, and then they hire to correct that. I always hired on the front end, which was more costly of man hours, but I always wanted to be able to provide the best service, for the phones being answered, for everything else. So I would hire ahead of time. In fact, when I hired the hygienist, I started her full-time, and we didn't need a full-time hygienist, but I was ready for new patients to come in and be ready. So, anytime I'd talk to people, they'd be like, that's the exact opposite way that you should do it. And I kept on thinking, man, I always did it the wrong way, but it's worked for me. So
do you feel like it gamified it a little bit for you though, Chad? Because that sounds to me similar to like Dr. Bruce.
It's an Excel file. Yeah, it was an Excel file decision. And I'd go, okay, one hygienist, 800 patients. Okay, we're at 400 right now. So I have a capacity to see 400 more. And yes, I'm paying on the front end for a loss of efficiency, but then I have capacity to grow.
Yeah.
Capacity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you were, believe it or not, I mean, your strategy would be the closest to what I would recommend. Because what I show people is, okay, as you have all of these different pieces of your puzzle, right? There's so many hours in the day, so many procedures you could do. It's relatively easy to figure out what your capacity is and once that fills up. But what you have to do is you have to ask, well, what are my goals? So if you're saying in 6 months, I want to be here or doing this much production, or I'm going to have this many active patients or whatever it is, then you run your current capacity through your goal, and it tells you where your bottlenecks are first. So it says, if I do want to go there, then I have to hire another hygienist. You don't wait till you've outstripped that capacity, because then you can't grow. And like you were talking about, on the other end of that, your opportunity cost is going to be way greater than the additional labor that you've picked up to grow into it. So it's very interesting, because there was a scenario that I worked out where the options were threefold. They wanted to do more. So you have folks who come in, they get a consult, and then they don't go forward. I mean, I know it doesn't happen to you, but it happens to a lot of other, not us, not our people, folks not in the PDA. And so their goal was, they were going to take the goal was the number of people who'd come in for consults and not gone forward. They wanted to cut that number in half. Okay. So the question was, all right, well, let's say you achieve your goal. Let's say you do that. What's the impact going to be to the practice? Could you even handle it? I ask that to new offices all the time. Like, okay, let's say that you're wildly successful and 200 new patients call tomorrow. What are you even going to do, right? So if they were to achieve that, they knew they'd have to increase capacity. So the choices were either extend their hours, build on more operatories, or they were going to move locations completely. And the beauty of just measuring it out, kind of as I just described, before they did any of that, they would have, if they had achieved their goal, they would have outstripped the capacity of the associate by about 134%. So they know they needed to, and the associate didn't want to work any more hours. So they either had to find a new associate to cover all the hours, or find a second part-time associate first before they could even accomplish that goal, or it wouldn't have worked anyway. So you were right that you have to pull the trigger early to grow into your goal, but a lot of folks either they don't know the mechanisms to do so, or even just the thought process of, it's not about today. I'm not waiting till we can't take it anymore to hit that release valve. I'm going to be growing. So what's that look like? And how do I shift and put my pieces together along the way? Like if I'm building another story on my house, you don't wait. First you have to make sure that the framing goes up, and then you have to make sure of this, and then the roof, and then finally you've got that thing there. So the support is there first. But a lot of folks, again, they just think about it differently. And it's the same thing with technology and in advanced to team. And again, I always pick on soft tissue lasers because that's probably the number one thing that I get asked about in terms of, well, do you think I should do this? Do you think I should start doing these procedures? I'm like, well, how many are you doing now? Number one. How many are you referring out? Number two. And so if that number is lower than obviously what it's going to cost you to acquire this, people are not going to start beating down your door.
And you know how people sell it? They sell it to dentists saying, hey, don't you want to do an $800 procedure every hour? Like, don't you think that would pay for itself? It's going to pay for itself.
Yeah, it's basically an ATM. Like, no, it's not.
We've all heard that.
Vacation home. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's very frustrating. Now, there's other pieces of technology a lot easier. Like CEREC, Chad, you're a big CEREC guy.
Yep.
That's an easier one to quickly evaluate what it's going to do, what the cost savings are going to be.
Do you already do crowns? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's that one's simple, or simpler, easier.
Yes.
But the one thing in that, and I'll ask you this, since you trained for CEREC users for a long time and still train people on implants and go out and lecture about that.
Yeah.
What we always tell them, of course, is it's not buying the equipment or the math working. It's the commitment to the training.
Absolutely.
That I think they forget about.
Yep.
So when people ask you and they're like, hey, you love CEREC, I'm going to jump into it. Like, how do you address that with them and say, like, you're gonna have to live this a bit?
Honestly, I hopped on my trainer on my bicycle in the basement and put out the ironing board. This is how we do it Iowa style. Okay. I put out the ironing board and put my laptop on that and watched 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute videos on CERECdoctors.com for hours straight for 6 months on everything to know about that. And that was my workout, was sitting watching those videos while I was cycling, learning those videos. The learning curve on it was harsh for 3 months, and then by 6 months it was easier, and we had got through all the learning curve to it. But I just immersed myself just like you would learn a language. I mean, you have to go in. But I've heard some people say, it's a doorstop, and it's like, well, I'm sure it makes a great doorstop, especially if you're making it a doorstop.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is the best time hack. I think repeat that. Really, everybody should really be listening to that because it's called time bending, in my opinion. I hear both Chad and Chris are really good at time bending. So a secret of mine is that I will go to people that I am inspired by because I feel like they can onboard information in a really quick fashion, and I've asked them and they all say the same thing. They have the same 24 hours that we do. You've got to find those opportunities where you can be focused. So Chad, you and your bicycle, me, that is exactly what I do. I put podcasts and I ride around my neighborhood. So some of my neighbors see me on the same route every day over and over, and I just say hi, and I'm able to get in, there's marketing podcasts that I love, different ways to stay on top of things. So that's a good time bending tip, Chad.
Yeah.
And if I buy a book and I don't finish it, what I always tell people is, the onus is on the author too. Like you have this sort of weird sense of like, if you buy a book and start reading it but don't finish it, like you somehow are lazy or a failure. I'm like, if you were halfway through a bad movie, are you obligated to finish it? No. But when people buy these pieces of technology, it's so different because I just made $100,000 potential commitment, and for you to not pour yourself into that, to not give it that full effort. I mean, that's
it's a shame.
And it would just be, I would really struggle with that. People buy gym memberships and don't go, okay, fine. Sure. But if you're going to pull the trigger on what would pay for your child's college education, be all in, figure it out, commit to that. I mean, I always joke whenever somebody says they're going to buy a treadmill, I could say, do you know how many clothes hangers you could buy? for that same price, because that's what it's going to turn into, by the way. Just a $3,000 clothes hanger in your room. You're going to drape stuff over it, and it's and even then. But it's so when you got into CEREC specifically, what version was that?
Oh, the BlueCam. It was November of 2011 that I got my BlueCam, and it was CEREC. I don't know if it was 3.8 or might have been 4.0 by then, something like, I don't, at this point it starts to make me go, I don't know, but eight years ago, but the BlueCam. So
even and every year, obviously, I think they just had Corona World again last week.
Yes.
And so they're always making things a little easier. I mean, they know exactly what the hurdles are.
Right.
But ultimately, it still doesn't matter how easy they make the technology, because obviously, if it's not good enough to go in your mouth, there's no way it should be going into a patient's mouth.
Sure.
Right. So when people talk to you, because I get this question a lot, where you'll get a doc who is competent in terms of that bread and butter. They're looking for those next steps, because I think I look at it through a different lens, where they're like, well, what should I do next? What courses should I take next? And I'm always thinking of high margin, easy to sell, big payoff aesthetically, or whatever it is. So for you clinically, typically I will say, or I'll drift them towards extractions as the next step.
Mm-hmm.
I hear great courses, great recommendations on that. I think they want me to say implants most of the time,
mm-hmm.
but that's...
well, listen, if you're not even pulling teeth, how are you going to close a case on doing an implant?
Oh, right. Very true. Very true.
Right.
So if you were to go back and stage your clinical path in terms of what you would learn, would you do anything differently? And what was the path for those folks listening?
3 weeks into graduation, I went to the AGD conference, and they were all like, you just graduated 3 weeks ago and you're going to continue ed? And I thought, well, what better time? It's not going to cost me much. I'm seeing 2 patients on Monday morning, like I'm only losing out on 2 patients. So now more than ever is the best time. I went to a 2-day course on implants. That was pretty fresh stuff. Jack Hahn, it was a Jack Hahn course. And then it was a 2-day oral surgery course by Dr. Kerner from Utah. I still remember that. And it was talking about wisdom teeth extractions, surgical extractions, how to do that kind of stuff. And so I started more oral surgery heavy, and that's really paid off, being able to, even if you weren't doing dental implants, being able to bone graft. You now go from let's just easy math it, a $200 extraction, and then you add in a bone graft for $200 or $300 or $400 from what I've heard all over. You've doubled one socket of your cost. I'm sorry, your production.
So that's obviously, for the average bear, the confidence that it takes, that being that fresh and that green to jump into that. I'm always amazed. In fact, I've heard this. I was literally told once by an Ivy League educated dentist who was struggling, and what this dentist told me in terms of the patients they'd like to attract, I said, well, what's the ideal patient? She said, someone who hasn't been to the dentist in 8 to 10 years but doesn't need much work. And I said, that's just not what you hear. But what obviously this person was indicating, which I do hear quite a bit, is even the confidence to where when you're face to face with more complicated cases,
yes,
a lot of folks just shy away.
Yes.
So was this one of the things where, obviously doing your first implant was probably nerve-wracking, but did you know, I want to do the complex stuff?
No.
That was the drive, no?
No, it took me a while too. And I even remember with Invisalign, when I graduated, I thought, maybe at 10 years out is when I'll start getting into orthodontics, just learning about that. But we weren't taught much about that in school. So sure enough, at about the 9-year mark, I went to an Invisalign course because I wanted to learn more about positioning teeth, where they should go and everything like that. So Invisalign and orthodontics was kind of on the tail end of my progression. But, and I would recommend that too. I don't know. I think there's people that really can do well at orthodontics and the business of orthodontics. I think by and large, though, $2,000 for a Invisalign fee, or someone else can say, well, it shouldn't be that expensive if you do it yourself. Fine, but then you're doing it yourself, or you're outsourcing it to your assistant, which is great. But how good are you at training them? And you already went to a $4,000 course to learn how to do, so now you're $4,000 behind there. So if you factor that in, so there's a lot of different factors in, but I'm just saying, if you do use something like Invisalign, a couple $1,000 as opposed to $500 for your edgewise appliances, that's a fourfold increase in your expenses. And it's tough to recover that and really feel like you're making a steal of a deal, even though to patients' eyes, it's $5,000, $6,000 for orthodontics. And it's like, man, why am I paying that much? And it's just like, shoot, I need to pay that because I'm going to be seeing you the next 2 years. You know,
yeah,
it just is
face to face.
Yeah.
Invisalign's a tough one because I mean, they knew what they were doing with the brand recognition, and obviously, what part of what you're paying for is that national ad campaign.
Yep.
So one of the things that I'll often show people is how to create a menu using different pricing strategies to where they can still come in. Invisalign's still on the table, but then kind of guide them to where they want to save money and say, well, you know, you can do it this way, this one, the benefit, we wouldn't say this way, but gives us more control, maybe speed. And since we have more control, it usually goes a little faster. Since it's faster, it's a little less expensive, even though it should be the opposite. And I go, oh, well, maybe I do want to go this route. Make it their choice. So it's not a bait and switch, but yeah, you see when people are spending externally, which is always a big one. What do you want to market for? Implants and Invisalign all the time. And I'm like, I get the implant. Invisalign though, and there's so much marketing for it, it's just noise. It's just noise.
It's nice personally to be able to do it and to be able to offer that for the best outcome for the patient. But if I were transparent with the patient, listen, I'm not doing this because I'm going, yes, that's going to make me a lot of money. It just really doesn't. And someone could prove me wrong, but I just don't feel like it really is. And I'm still glad to do it for the patient's sake, but because I feel like it helps patients' health overall for their mouth. But I don't do it because it's like, all right, I stole this from the orthodontist. Ha ha.
Yeah, nailed it. Well, Reagan, remember we talk about this a lot and use the same term, this danger zone, where if you can design a program around Invisalign to make it more profitable, but most folks don't have the time to really evaluate and think about the fact that they're spending, potentially hundreds of dollars to acquire that patient via the marketing. Then they're coming in, they're saying yes to it, but now they're going to run it through Care Credit, at least maybe even portion of it. So there's another 10%. And if there's a remainder, going to put that on a credit card. So there's another few percent out the window, plus then all the time behind it and whatnot. And it becomes a zero-sum game pretty darn fast if you're not careful. But that number is big and it seems big and it feels fun. It goes back to that term that Reagan and I talk about all the time. It's vanity metrics. It's like, you get to put a big number up there in terms of production, but when you look at the bottom line, man, oh man, like maybe we need to look at other avenues. And again, nothing against Invisalign. They put a lot of smiles on people's faces.
Is this something that's talked about a lot? Because I listen to the dental podcast and I haven't heard that a lot around Instagram, and you really hit it. I mean, you hit it on the head, both of you, with talking about what's pulled down to the bottom line. Do dentists really, like the ones that are especially attracted to Invisalign, is that something that's common knowledge for them?
Well, I think we talk about it in the AACD, the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, is so I want to submit, this is all fine and good, don't get me wrong, but they want me to submit 5 cases, and each case I'm going to spend 40 hours doing the work and redoing it, and then taking pictures, sending it to my mentor, and then redoing it again. And hopefully the patient at that point doesn't hate me, and maybe redoing, the incisal edges, and the embrasure forms and stuff like that. And then it's like, listen, I'm a PPO dentist and I got to make money. Like at some point when and I'd love to do this because I took the test and then I was, trying to do the cases, and I was just like, I can't actually focus on this vanity work when I just want to do good work. And sometimes, if I'm honest, I'll nail it. And other times I just go, it's not bad, but like in a critical eye, it's just okay. I'm just being honest. It's just like, it's not great. And then like this morning I had one that I finished up a little late into lunch, and I was like, that one right there, that was awesome. I brought him over and I said, hey, to my office manager, Kayla, come here, look at this. Look at that incisal edge. Do you see the halo that I put on that? Yeah. Look how that matches number 10. Look at that. Oh man, that's good looking. And I really, get a kick out of that. But that's not every case. It's just not.
Well, and it's not going to be. But also, I think what I've always loved about you is that when the patients only know what they know. We call it the assumption of aptitude. They just assume that, you're a dentist and you could do it, so the other dentists should be able to as well. When you get excited when you know that it's fit together and it's a special thing. You have to, with that genuine enthusiasm, just like you displayed, sharing that with the patient. I mean, that's the part they're going to remember.
Yep.
Like, wow. And they're going to be relieved, number one, that you're so happy. And it's, people just don't share those things with the patients.
That's totally like the Maya Angelou quote, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah,
People
exactly.
they don't remember what you say. But they remember how you feel. Like, and you guys, you listeners can't see Chad's face. He was beaming, busting out. He was,
I was proud of that one.
My Invisalign, but I haven't made it out to Iowa yet. So,
you know what's really cool, Chris? I did this with him as well. Reagan, you'll get a kick out of this. When I showed Kayla, I said, and you know what? He even knew the word translucency. He knew that that's what I was mimicking. I was like, I didn't tell him that. He knew it. And it was really cool to kind of bring him in to be like, yeah, I kind of am a connoisseur. It's kind of like how Dr. Bruce says, he probably already knew that, right? And yeah. So, hey, Chris, let me ask, because we definitely, again, I want to invite you to come back, but is there any good book that you've read lately? Any favorite books that you've pulled off the shelf?
Oh, yeah. So as many of you know, I set a goal and I've got two more weeks to go, where I try to read one book every week. So when people ask me what my favorite book is, it's still Slaughterhouse-Five. Yeah. So Kurt Vonnegut, and it's anyway. There's a long story behind that, big Iowa connection with Kurt Vonnegut, and that's the book where, because it's nonlinear, it's one of those great bedside readers where you can really open it up at any point and jump into the story, which makes it kind of fun. But I've been on an interesting streak. I was pulling up my books here. I'd heard a podcast with this guy, Sean Carroll, and he'd written this book called Something Deeply Hidden, and it's all about quantum physics and interesting things like that. And you try to want to know enough about that because it's so bizarre. But what I found was, and I didn't listen when he said it on his podcast, that it's not an easy read. This is read a paragraph, take some notes, reread the paragraph, wipe the tears away from your eyes, and then maybe you'll kind of grasp it. So it's slow going. So I had to start another one, and I went back. There's a gentleman that I talk about a lot in my lectures, Edward Bernays, who was a gentleman back in the 1920s who he's kind of credited with a number of things, but he has a book called Propaganda, where he was one of the first people en masse to use media to manipulate our thoughts, feelings, and opinions for some sort of subversive reason. And it's just so fascinating, like how many things were just put into play because ultimately a guy like me made it up. Great example. Breakfast is the most important
meal of the
day. He made that up. So he was, and the long story is, so back during the wars, most of the females had to go into the workforce because the gentlemen were off fighting the wars. So they had these kids that they weren't having a breakfast. And Kellogg's came out, of course, with their flakes and said, don't worry, moms, we've got this vitamin-enriched flakes. Give them to your kids. You're going to be taken care of. Well, if they're buying cereal now, it means they're not buying eggs and bacon. Chad, eggs and bacon. So all of a sudden, the egg and bacon people get a hold of Edward Bernays and say, hey, man, we're losing a lot of business. What can you do? So he goes around and gets something along the lines of 600 physicians to sign this article that he runs in full-page ads all around the country saying that if you truly want your children to be healthy, these are the things they need to be having for breakfast because it's the most important meal of the day. Totally made it up. And so that's where that came from, was literally just in an effort to sell more bacon and eggs, not based on anything else. And when you get deeper into this whole thing, and due to some of his efforts, actually overthrew the government of Guatemala back in the day, which actually was us undercutting these fruit prices. And it gets, all this stuff is just so interesting. But yeah, he was the guy that kind of invented a lot of these strategies all the way back when. And it's just unbelievable that we're still saying it. We're still saying breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
I just like his name. If I had his name, it has this classiness to it. It's Edward Bernays. I just say my name is Chad Johnson, right? It's just normal.
Did he come up with diamonds are a girl's best friend too?
That was before him. So that was De Beers that invented that right around 1904 or somewhere in there. Because if folks aren't familiar, having a diamond engagement ring is a newer construct. Mm-hmm. It used to be something very simple and they came out with that slogan. And of course, back to traditional economics, diamonds are essentially worthless. The only reason they have any value is because it's 100% controlled marketplace. Like, I think this, and somebody will have to fact check me on the actual stats, but I believe De Beers alone has enough diamonds to where if they stopped mining them completely and kept selling them as is, they wouldn't run out for like 230 years or something insane. Like, they just have them all. So that's the only reason they're valuable versus gold, which is truly rare and truly valuable and maintains a million unique properties that make it special. But I'm not saying invest in gold. I'm just saying it is actually rare. If you took all the gold that's ever been mined and put it together, it'd fill 2 Olympic swimming pools. That's it. It'd be about the bottom 2/3, maybe a little less, of the Washington Monument. That's all of it. That's all the gold we have in the entire world. Isn't that nuts?
Today I learned.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, it's all the things you didn't ask about. But fascinating stuff. Anyway, we're terrible with time management, but we will be back, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
But let me ask you one last thing, Chad, because as all these conversations I've been having as dentists are furthering their career, here's the big spectrum of dentistry that you can do. The longer you do it, the less of it you want to do. What was the first thing you didn't want to do anymore?
Removable dentures, partials.
There you go. And
you know what's interesting? In my evolution of doing full mouth rehabilitation stuff, I've gone back to doing dentures and partials.
Full circle.
So I went back to it. But hey, Chris, so next time I want to talk about stat tracking, basically the very thing that the other people were, wanting you to talk about, and how you said that, there was kind of an echo chamber of frustration with talking about what to do and everything like that. But I think stat tracking and, how to go about that would be a good tangible thing that we need to talk about the next time you're on, if you don't mind.
Well, yeah. And in fact, I've just learned how to build out these, they're pretty darn sophisticated. But once you know how to do it, it's just a matter of putting somebody else's data through it. But it's so eye-opening to where just all the leakage in terms of profitability, like how accurately you can forecast what's going to happen out to days, weeks, months, and all this kind of stuff. And it's and that's one of the things that PDA that we're always talking about. It's member built and driven. Where people are struggling, we got to build out our skill set in those areas, because that's why we're here. You guys take amazing care of people, and we're going to figure out the tools to make this thing a little bit easier. But I'll show you some of the predictive and more. There's predictive analytics, what's going to happen, and there's what's called prescriptive analytics, which is what can I do to influence the outcome?
Nice.
Like, which levers do I pull to make this change? And it's nuts in terms of, and not to get into it now, but it's like, how does Netflix know what movies you're going to like? Like, if you go to the grocery store, they'll know based on if you buy 1 or 2 different items, they'll know this whole chunk over here, you'll never buy. These ones here, if they give you a coupon, you'll absolutely buy.
Or so YouTube's watch next. Right.
Exactly. Same style of algorithm. It's the same style of algorithm for high frequency trading. So a lot of it is when somebody comes in, like, it's about energy, and you only have so much. So it's like, why wouldn't it be helpful to know, like, this person categorically is more likely to say yes or be interested in these things, and those things, the percentage is like 0.02. And so don't just get a little bit of intelligence in there, because the big guys, the big groups, they're doing it. Like,
and I'm such a rebel. I don't like when I go to the grocery store and they're like, would you like your, to use your points? No.
Get it from someone else. But anyway, I appreciate it. We'll come back and we'll have to go video style for the podcast so people can see some of these materials. Because
nice.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, because just watching how it all comes together is very interesting. And given the folks we're talking to, they like detail. So we'll give it to them.
Excellent. Regan, thanks for co-hosting with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Chris, thanks for joining us.
And I am off to Italy, which I would have said in Italian had I bothered to learn any.
Off to Italy. Oh, I'm not even going to do that. That's just wrong.
All right. Thanks, gang.
All right, y'all take care. Everyone, thanks for joining us in this October edition of Everyday Practices. We'll see you next week.
Bring your lunch or take us to the gym again next week to improve your everyday practices. Also, subscribe on iTunes, follow us on social media, and sign up for our email list. Now get out there and win with Everyday Practices.